But today I'm going to be talking to millennials mostly, those people who are 40 or even under 40 and have zero retirement. Is it too late? First of all, I want to say the idea of a traditional retirement is so not real. It is not real for any millennials. It is not real for any Gen Xers. We don't get that either. It is barely real and truly real for only a certain percentage of baby boomers. That idea of, hey, you work 40 years, you have this set retirement. The people who actually got that, and it was higher than like 5% of the population, were the greatest generation. They're the people who retired in the 60s, 70s, 80s. They might have had that kind of retirement, but nobody since then has actually had that idea of a fully funded long retirement. Things have changed, and they changed decades ago. So don't think you're the first generation to grapple with the idea that retirement, that word, actually is a set type of income and you don't have to do anything. Yeah, no, that hasn't been the case for generations now. It's not going to be the case for you either. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Years ago in the 90s, I was a financial advisor. And in the late 80s, they started allowing companies to stop pensions and start 401ks. Many companies just traded them out. You had the option to move your pension amount into a 401k and then add to it. So there are actually very few people these days that have any kind of pension, a set payment amount every month. Now, if you're in government work or perhaps you're in a union, you might still have a little bit of that, but the vast majority of people don't. They have maybe, and I say maybe, 401ks. And they maybe have a company match. They may not. So the idea that you're going to have this humongous pile of cash and you're going to save all that money and that's going to fund your retirement, that's not true and hasn't been true for a long time. And you may be asking yourself, well, then what did all these Gen Xers do? How did that work out for them? Because they were basically the initial generation that started with these 401ks. Great, right? Yeah, no, it was not great. It hasn't been great. The idea that you're going to put enough money into that 401k to fund your retirement is also a fallacy. You're limited to what you can contribute, and when you're young and working in your early stages, you're not contributing much, are you? It's just part of your retirement. But let's talk about what happened to Gen Xers, because this could also happen to you. Generation X, when we had the last big recession, which was basically 2009, 2010. The recession was during those years. Most of us Gen Xer, I'm an older Gen Xer, I'm in my mid-50s, but most of us had some money in a 401k. We had just kind of started. And you know, even if you've been working 10 years, you don't necessarily have a huge amount in that 401k yet, right? We didn't either. But what happened during the last recession, there was no stimulus, there was no support for self-employed people, there was no unemployment, there was nothing to catch you when the market crashed, when the housing market crashed. In fact, the economic environment right prior to that recession looked very similar to what it does today. The housing market was on a tear, just crazy pricing for houses. Many of us bought houses at the top of that market, and some of you have too. The stock market was booming. Our accounts were like fluffy. It was great until it wasn't. Once you have a recession and all of that crashes, what happens is, and this is what happened to me, I was self-employed at the time. I got no unemployment. There was no support. All I had was a little bit of money, and we're talking less than $15,000 in my 401k. I had a spouse with a bigger 401k, but his was only about $80,000, and he'd been working for almost 20 years on it. So there wasn't a lot of money because those 401ks don't really start to accumulate until the very end, until you're almost at retirement. In those early years, it's slow. And if you've checked on your 401k, you're probably really disappointed it's not more. Well, when that happened, when that recession happened, a lot of us, most of us, I would say, had to pull some money out of those 401ks or completely pull all of the money out. And as that recession progressed, layoffs happened. People stopped issuing credit. In fact, those of us who had high limit credit cards, even if you paid it off every month, started getting letters saying, oh, we're closing your account, because all those companies started wanting to limit their exposure. They didn't want people to have big credit lines anymore because they were afraid they wouldn't be able to pay them during the recession. That's going to happen again. So don't think you're going to live off your credit cards. Not happening. I lost my house. It went into foreclosure. My business went into bankruptcy. I had no more retirement at all. Zip. Nada. And I had over $200,000 worth of business debt I had to pay. You can't just get out of debt. You have to pay it. I also had $40,000 worth of student loans still. So I understand where you're at if you're still paying on those student loans. I was there. And let me tell you, when I would sit down and think about that, no house, no credit, nothing in the bank, no retirement whatsoever, over 40, it was so overwhelming and depressing. I thought, I'll never recover. I'll never have a credit rating again. I can't pay all this money off. It's almost $250,000. I can't pay all this money. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? It was very overwhelming. Some of you will be in that situation over the next few years, especially if we slide into a deep recession. But what I'm here to tell you is you can recover. You absolutely can recover. Not only can you create a good retirement for yourself in a very short period of time, 10 years or less, you can even retire early, because guess what? That's what I did. So let's talk about what you need to do to make that happen. The first thing you need to do is get ahead of your finances. Pay off that debt. And I don't mean just pay it off a little bit. I mean put everything you have toward that debt. Lower your expenses. And that's what I had to do. I spent about 4 years just struggling to pay about $2,500 a month toward my debt. I didn't have a choice. It was set by the bankruptcy court. I had to pay it. I did not have the option to lower that. I had to pay it. And I struggled for about 4 years. I did everything I could do. There were times I was selling stuff out of the house. There was times I was actually had work to do where I was writing books and doing things of that nature for clients. But it was tough. And after about 4 years, I decided, you know what? My spouse was not doing well physically, and I needed the health insurance because he might lose his. So I thought, I just got to go back to corporate. I've got to go back to the corporate job. And I hadn't been in corporate in probably 15 years, but I had to go back to corporate. So I did. Went back to corporate. Spent every bit of my money, that $2,500 a month, trying to pay that debt down. And I lasted another couple of years, so I'm 6 years in. And it was a 10-year plan, y'all, to get this all paid off. It was crazy. It was a 10-year plan. I thought, oh, gosh. After 6 years of this, I was so frustrated. Wasn't making any headway. We couldn't even take a vacation. I felt totally closed down. It was awful. Even though I was making headway, it just felt horrible. So I made a really big decision. I decided to move, take a higher paying job, and cut my expenses to nothing. I lived in a little 2-bedroom trailer house where the rent was very low. I didn't have cable. I didn't spend money on anything extra. I mean, I basically ate beans and cornbread for every day. It was really tough. But within 2 years, instead of 4 years, I had paid off the rest of that debt. At that point, I ended up losing that job. Actually, I quit that job, but then I was fired. It's a whole thing. Anyway, I lost that corporate job. And at first I thought, well, I can go for 6 or 8 months, but then I'm going to have another job. I'm going to have to. That's what you do. You think, I've got to have this job in order to live. I've got to. Well, guess what? All my debt was paid. And I realized, not having a 9-to-5, I had time to pursue all these side interests. I had time to write more books, to work with more clients. And that's what I did. And I realized after a couple of years, you know what? I don't need to go back to a corporate job. I can continue doing this. A couple of years after that, I started my YouTube channel. All of these things have worked together to provide me income for retirement. It's ongoing income. These are income streams that work all the time, and I'm doing more and more of them. And now that I think about it, if someone had told me when I was 42 and all this disaster happened, when you're 50, you're going to get to semi-retire early. Not only that, you're going to develop this incredible life that provides you a retirement with income streams from multiple sources, and you will be set. I would have never believed that. Never. It was so overwhelming. There are going to be a lot of you that go through these similar circumstances over the next few years. But preparing yourself will allow you to navigate that better. Doesn't mean you'll come out perfect. Even if you end up losing that house you bought at the top of the market that 2 years later is worth 80% of what you paid, did it. Even if you have to pull out all of your retirement where you have no retirement left, did it. Even if you end up having to pay off $250,000 worth of debt, including a huge student loan, did it. You can do it too. But it's not easy. So I really want to encourage you that no matter what happens or how dark it may look for you, you will come out of it. You will be able to navigate through it if you just focus. If you really get serious about getting rid of that debt. That's the big one. If I'd had no debt at 42, I would have recovered in just a few years. But it took me almost 10 years just to start because I was paying this debt. So do yourself a big favor. Get rid of that debt. And I really want you to invest in yourself. Now, what does that mean? If you have interests or things that you want to do that might eventually be a side gig for you, then start learning and investing in yourself now. It is not too late. It's not too late for you to do that even if you're over 40. I have been talking about a series of books called the Love Train series. And the reason that I have been talking about these books, and here's the next 3 in the series that have just come out, books 7, 8, 9, all of these women are over 50. The vast majority of them didn't start their writing careers until they were over 50. There are some that are in their 60s, some in 70s. There's one that's over 80. They are all working together to produce and have income from something they love doing, which is writing books. Now, what I want you to do, there's links below to these next 3 books in the series. And there's also a link to the first book in the series. I want you to go and look through these books. Look at how many reviews they have. Look how big a following these women each have. They developed that following well after the age of 40. I started my YouTube channel when I was 54. I developed my entire following after the age of 50. I hear so many young people, and 40 to me is young, say, oh, I'm just too old. It's passed me by. No, it hasn't. All of these women and myself, we are proof that it has not passed you by. Life doesn't pass you by. You get opportunities throughout your entire life, and you can take advantage of them at any age. You don't have to do things and be perfect in your 20s in order to have a great life and a great retirement. That's not true. You can do it at any time. And even if circumstances are dire, you can dig yourself out of that hole and move on to situations that are much better and still have a retirement. It is not a lost cause just because you're 40 and you've dug a huge pit of debt. That is not a lost cause. I wasn't a lost cause, and I did it by myself. I did these things by myself. You can do it too. So don't wait. Prepare now. Get rid of your debt. Work on it harder. put more money toward it, and then save some money back. When we have a recession, that's when the opportunities arrive. When the housing market crashed in the last recession, some friends of mine really got into the rental market. They bought a bunch of rentals. They have, as the housing market has escalated over the last 2 years, they've sold most of those. They're multimillionaires now. There are always opportunities when there is a recession. So understand you want to set yourself up not only to have lower expenses and be able to weather a recession, but also to take advantage of opportunities you may see. Because 10 years from now, they may make you a multimillionaire. So don't wait. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please click subscribe, and I'll see you next time.